I learned early in life to root for other people's successes. And it's been one of the greatest gifts, is to genuinely root for others and try and bring out the best in others, including my employees or anybody that I run into. It's brought so much joy to my career to watch other people succeed.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast and back to our original studio setup. Really excited to have Peter Mirabello on, Chairman and CEO of Metal Finishing Technologies. Peter, thanks for coming on, my friend.
Ari, thanks for having me.
Listen, it's absolutely my pleasure, but it's the Made in America podcast, Peter. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
We're a metal finishing house, and we make metal perform better. We've been doing it for 75 years.
There you go. 75 years, metal perform better. Who do you make it perform better for?
All right, so aerospace and defense. Any aircraft, as always, one of the goals will be to reduce the weight in the aircraft. By doing so, it can fly longer or stay up in the air longer, or it can carry a heavier payload. The way that you do that is by coming up with better substrates. But those substrates need to be finished then to still be able to perform like the heavier materials. So we can put finishes on those that can make it resist heat, strength, resist corrosions. The other thing we do, the two-part answer, is we also can use chemistry to then take those parts after they've been in the field, remove the coatings with a very aggressive, controlled chemical process, get rid of the coating but not attack the parent material. You can then inspect it, and then figure out how to overhaul and repair it and put it back into service. We like that probably as much as anything because that means we're pulling less minerals out of the ground by reusing these parts. So
listen, reduce, reuse, recycle, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And I know you've got a lot of green stuff to talk about. I know sustainability is really big for you guys. You've done a lot on it, with the CPACE program and stuff you've done yourselves. I definitely want to get into some of that. Also, you've done a lot with, sales, marketing, and SEO. I think that's a really great, lesson we can learn. You're running a great business. So you've got some HR and recruiting and training and retention stuff I want to get to. So we're gonna get to all that. But I'd really always like to talk about sort of the why, how did we get here? So Pete, maybe you could just run us through sort of your background. Where'd you get started in manufacturing? How did you end up from those beginnings to chairman and CEO of MFT?
Well, I've been very fortunate in what I've been exposed to. I started my career as a manufacturing development engineer for Pratt & Whitney. We were working on prototype parts or prototype processes or prototype theories. So I think when I got there, it was the tail end of statistical process control with Dr. Edwards Deming. And we got into Six Sigma, Kaizen, Lean. I got Six Sigma and Kaizen reversed. So we learned a lot about manufacturing. And from there, I was really fortunate at the tail end of a very illustrious career, a gentleman named Bob Rosati. And if you know anything about Pratt, really, he put motors on the 747s and things like that. Asked me to represent the Pratt-Rolls partnership in Toulouse to try and get some market share on the A320 aircraft.
Overseas, my man goes.
3 years, I got to meet the people that invented the side stick technology, Bernard Ziegler. I got to watch and work with Colin Stewart, who was the marketing person who really started by marketing the Concorde and ended up being the person when I was there was putting Airbus on the map. So the second part was, after learning the manufacturing, is really what does it mean to operate an aircraft and what are the key characteristics and how is that game played?
So is that more... Is that sales and is it go-to-market strategy? So what did you say you're learning there? Sort of a go-to-market?
I was a commercial director, and so what my job was to figure out where the airframe sales were against the 737 and say, listen, we've got Pratt and Rolls ready to support this in any way that we can to help you beat and win the competition versus Boeing, and then at the same time create a position for IAE and the V2500 to win the motor deal. Gotcha. And so you really understand about range and performance and fuel economy. You start to understand what's really important to the end user, which has been a theme in my whole career. After what I thought were very good years there, I actually got pulled away by a smaller company it's called NetJets now. At the time, it was called Executive Jet. It was just bought by Berkshire Hathaway, and they were looking to scale it. So I got a chance. The guy that brought me in there, Rich Santulli, founded the fractional model. which now
Fractional jet model, meaning it's like before that it was either you're going commercial or you're going full own the jet,
Full
100%.
ownership.
You gotta hangar it, you gotta maintain it. So you had two options, and then he comes
100%.
in and says, "Hey, this is a very expensive. Is it called an asset? I guess technically it's a
definitely
appreciating
an
asset on your balance sheet, but very expensive asset. But looking for people maybe who don't have like the wealth to own a big plane,
Right.
but maybe have the income to share it with somebody else, sort of like
Sure.
a boat share model kind of.
100%. Well, I think the boat share model and everything else that's been fractionalized is a byproduct of the model that Rich created.
The jets came first.
The jets were first. He invented
kidding.
the fractional model. He was a mathematician out of New York, worked at Goldman, put together this leasing model. When they moved it to Houston, he didn't want to go with it, being from New York, and he wanted to buy this platform called Executive Jet. But they had all the records because it was a military installation. And he started to look at the model and, without getting too much into the detail, constructed the fractional model. And then when he sold it to Berkshire, they were looking to scale it, and they didn't think they could do it organically. So they asked me to come in, and I got to be an architect of a business that between 99 and when I left in 2008 had gone from about 50 airplanes to about 700.
Wow.
And again, it was just fortuitous on my part, again, to be around some people, some great entrepreneurs, and they really taught me what it took to run a business, the panoramic, not just one specialty, but all of it. They were tough, but they were very fair. And, after that, it
Pretty
just,
cool experience.
it was a tremendous experience. It was a
Not
great
a lot
part
of people
my life.
get to go. I mean, that's a huge scaling from 50 to 700 airplanes. I got to imagine, with those airplanes comes a lot of revenue management. You got the employee growth. You got to deal with having to figure out how to manage all these different customers. I mean, you got to be juggling a lot of different stuff to make that happen.
All of it. Very, very complicated business model. So you're doing 400 flights a day, some of them on as little as 8 hours notice. So you don't know where the airplane's going to wind up. Yet they had these very, very high levels of safety. So both pilots need to be captain qualified. By the time I left, we had 13 types. So we had 13 sets of crews. You had to make sure the maintenance was good, and then the catering and the ground transportation and all the logistics that went with it.
Got to imagine a demanding set of customers, probably.
Yeah, when you spend a lot of money on a private jet, you can't believe it's going to break.
Yeah.
Unless you know something about manufacturing, and then you could say, honestly, you wouldn't want to pay what it would take to make sure you had 100% availability.
Sure.
But the truth is, this network of identical jets and 13 aircraft types, you could always plug another one in, or you could give them a larger airplane. So anyways, got a chance to work with them. I think the most fascinating thing was we pulled a Citation 10 into Centennial Airport one day, and the airplane was broken, but it was a minor fix. And so we said, can you fix it? And the guy said, I'll put my best person on tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. We're like, no. We got an $18 million asset. We got to put it to work. We realized there was no infrastructure for that. So I was lucky enough to be part of building that infrastructure in conjunction with the OEMs. Again, a great learning experience. So
that takes us to the Great Recession, I think, right? Do we still call it that? The 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And so you get out of NetJets, and what'd you do at that point?
Family reasons. I just felt like I needed to be home for a little bit. Like we all do. We try and balance the work life and the home life. I probably stayed away from business a little bit longer because of the recession. I think when I finally said it's time for me to be at home, versus traveling as much, was probably with 2 weeks before Bear Stearns got bought by J.P. Morgan. At the end of that summer, Lehman Brothers kind of went extinct, and we went into that crazy period. Looking back on it, was fortuitous that I got a chance to be home, with my family as much as I did. But as that wound down, I said, I got to find something closer to home, to operate, preferably own. And I found MFT in Plainville, which was a darling of a company, but around 2003, the owner, a really brilliant guy who I never got a chance to meet, passed young and unexpectedly due to an accident. So from 2003 to 2010, remember that market turned. It was in kind of tough shape. But anyways, one way or another, I wound up at MFT.
So you kind of go through this, manufacturing airplanes, kind of doing that thing, scaling NetJets gives you a ton of experience. Then you're stay-at-home dad for a couple of years, making sure your daughters are in good shape. And then what? You're just driving down the street and you see a for sale sign on a business. Like, how do you get from sort of taking a break to, hey, there's a business to buy?
There was a couple of days when I asked myself that question. Like, it seemed like it was a good idea, but I was just sitting on a nonprofit board, and one of the people was a single shingle business broker. Said you ought to take a look at it. At first,
did he know you were looking, or?
Yeah, oh yeah. He also
So you
knew
sort
my
of just had it
background.
out there. You were just kind of.
I was looking for something to operate, preferably owned, but I wanted to do it locally. So anyways, fortuitous, I wound up at MFT, and then some good luck happened shortly thereafter. Remember, around 2014, Pratt made a commitment to stay in the state to 2029, right? And I thought, wow, that's pretty big. And since then, there's been a whole groundswell of enthusiasm and effort to really invigorate this manufacturing infrastructure. And it occurred to me then that that's really hard to recreate. Right,
Yep.
the billions of dollars in time it would take to recreate it otherwise. So,
Aerospace Alley, right?
when I wound up at MFT, they were really just doing a lot of commercial stuff. But I found this little overhaul situation in the back that was pretty good that nobody was paying attention to, and it really kind of contracted down to nothing. So as you go into a business, right, you don't really know what you know. Everybody's kind of doing this, right, and you don't know who to believe. So you kind of sit on your hands a little bit and take some sort of inventory. But I found that FAA repair station. And so my background, right, which I just explained, it made a lot of sense. And I said, you know what, there's something here.
You found something you knew.
And over the last, that was 2000, and the first couple of years, you don't really do much. You're just really trying to say, what is the reality of what we have here, and keep this thing going and start to nurture it. By 2014 to 2019, we really breathed life into this overhaul facility, and it's, we're good at it. We're subject matter experts at it, and we're dying to help people get their airplanes back in service.
So, you've got, really big business experience, right? I mean, you started at, Fortune 500, right? Or maybe Fortune 10, whatever. And sort of going through that, and then, you're working through Berkshire. So maybe NetJets is, big by most people's business standards, but small by probably your background standards. But then you scale that up really big. And then you sort of end up, at a spot here in Plainville, Bristol area with like a few dozen employees.
About 42, I think.
Okay, so there you go.
A few dozen, yeah.
You had more planes at NetJets than employees at MFT when you started, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just thinking, you get started. Where do you start, and how do you translate your big business experience to be valuable for a small business?
I'll be honest with you. Part of it is an inventory, right? Because UTC, they had manuals and depths and really good instructions. At Berkshire, you had all the great resources that you wanted. You figured you'd learn something. You get into this company, and I kept looking over my shoulder, and I'd be like, there's nobody back there, right? And so I'm saying, I got to make 20 decisions today, and I know I'm good for 12 of them. I just don't know which one of the 8 I'm not going to get right. And so it almost became sequential in that we said, all right, let's take a look at what we have for the equipment. Let's understand what it is we can really do. Let's not do a ton of advertising, because I learned early that's called bet the brand. Mm-hmm. We can always convince people to send something to us once, but if you can't deliver, you just played bet the brand.
Yep.
And so we kind of went through this scaling sequence. Little by little, people started to reveal themselves. You started to understand more and more about the operation. And little by little, we built a team. We have a tremendous team there. My job from the beginning is to make myself obsolete, to allow this thing to really run, right? So we just had our 75th anniversary. I said, let's get it to 20, let's get it to 100, which means there's probably 3 more CEOs behind me if you just figure 6 years each. Mm-hmm. My job is to build a system that's going to way outlead it, and that's what my job's been the whole time. Sleeves rolled up most of it to let people know, but the heat's on right now, and I'm in there with you. But we built a really good team, and then really in 2020, I actually brought in some investors, which I was really excited about, from out of state, made an investment in the state of Connecticut. Their other 2 offices are at Tinker Air Force Base and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So we got them to come in, but I probably glossed over a lot of it. But
so let's I want to talk about the team, because I think a lot of times, look, one of my goals is to help business leaders learn from each other, and something I think some business leaders get wrong is they're spending too much time on the what and not enough time on the who. And the who's so important. Well, listen, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think the who is so important, maybe the most important thing. And you keep talking about the team, so maybe talk a little bit about that. How do you think about building the team, and what did you do to get the right team in place?
Yeah, so to build the team, I wound up in a fortuitous but slightly unfortunate way. Wound up bringing in my own CFO, probably about 13 or 14 months into it. Because I promised the seller that I would keep everybody intact. But after a while, I was like, I don't need any help bankrupting this place. I can do that on my own, okay? So can we just do this? And little by little, a very, very talented CFO. And then we brought in a GM shortly thereafter, and we started to work together. And so my first message was, I need you to understand how the business works and how it makes money, and then I need you to communicate that. And I would do things like saying, okay, now we got to get depth as we scale. You guys are my scaffolding. When I think about the numbers, Lisa, I can put my head down at night and just sleep comfortably. Who's your scaffolding? And over time, we started to bring in some outstanding quality people. We're developing some very good production people. We've just launched a business development group, which we can talk about. Mm-hmm. And we started to build depth. Can I just pull on that for a second?
Just so you talk about building scaffolding. So I'm hearing that saying support for you, right? So you took a step back and said, I'm not feeling super comfortable about something about our numbers, either mm-hmm. not being reported, not insightful enough, whatever it is.
Right.
So you need to build some support to say, okay, I got someone here that I can trust and have confidence in that's going to get me where I need to go on that. So now that part of the team is built, I got to go build something else. Is that?
Well, I'm trying to encourage them as leaders to build their scaffolding. Where is your team that you can have comfort with? When you talk about a controller, it's a great thing. They come in and they're controlling, they're putting numbers in boxes. But when you get into treasury, now you're dealing with cash flows and things like that, and dealing with banks, and really working more with cash flow statements in the balance sheet, where the controller is going to keep track of the income statement. And then the CFO becomes a strategic partner. Lisa's beyond capable for all three, but you can get caught up in a lot of those. So where can you offset that? Where's your scaffolding? Where's a good young person you can groom along?
Hard to have a strategic CFO if she's doing the box filling and 100%. All that stuff. Yep.
Interpret the numbers.
Sure.
We'll worry about who's hanging them on the scoreboard in left field, right? So we did that. I think it's the same thing in production. I think, we live in a world where these products fly at 35,000 feet with a lot of people on them. There is a technical compliance that you need, and there's also, you got to make sure the paperwork's good, and they're both critically important. You need to be audit ready. The moat around our business is some of the sensitive materials we handle, and we've got the infrastructure to do that. But you need to be able to do all those things, as well as be able to communicate it to your customers. So again, short-circuiting the conversation, and I don't mean to do that. But now we're ready to go tell the world we're pretty good. Okay, good. Do we have the infrastructure now to handle the uptick in workload, mm-hmm. or are we going to start to once again play bet the brand? So,
and there's a lot of that comes down to people. So you're building your own scaffolding. You're helping your leaders build their scaffolding.
Yes.
That's the key infrastructure set up to get going in the first place from your perspective?
Absolutely. Right. There's certain fundamentals in there that you need to understand technically, or you need to understand about the EH&S world, or you need to understand about the numbers or how to use the marketing tools. So that's a given. But you got to find the right people. We thought all along that we've seen a lot of talented teams in life that had bad locker rooms and weren't able to perform. And so, it's never easy, but you work really hard at your culture. So it's about hiring the right people.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, right? How many sports teams have we seen? It's a team of superstars, but they can't win they can win a game, but can't win anything big. So now that we've been in a position in manufacturing, I'm sure this has hit you guys too, where recruiting, retention is a limit on how fast we can grow, because there's only, so if you can't do the work, like you're talking about, you're betting the brand. So you need the people, but if you can't find the people, then you can't grow the business. So a lot of manufacturers are talking about that challenge. Do you think the work you did in your early years of talking about this building of scaffolding and building teams, has that translated into ability to recruit and retain at sort of the tactical level of the business as well?
Yeah, it definitely has. We've attracted some really good young folks, and we're lucky enough to have some seniors that have worked their whole career, that have retired, that didn't want to fully retire, that wrote a lot of the specifications, that can come in and mentor them. But for us, it's really, we do a lot of work with the state. We love the efforts. And I wrote down some of the agencies that we work with. But we work with the Capital Workforce Partners, Advanced Manufacturing Employer Partnership, Capital Area Partnership, Workforce Alliance, the ACM, and it's really a matter of, it's really two-pronged. One, we can talk about what we're trying to do for schools in the corridor that we're in, but we're also trying to just to get the word out for manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool is we know the local universities, the 4 years. We work a lot with the 2-year schools, a lot with the technical schools. We actually have our head of HR, who's outstanding, actually going to speak at the high schools now, the public high schools, and really to talk to the parents about the viability and the reality of having a manufacturing career. That is more global for manufacturing because we just think this rising tide is going to raise all boats.
Absolutely.
In parallel with that, something we're working on, and what we do in this chemistry world, is there's not a real curriculum. So we're in the process of working with it. We're in the process of some early discussions with the state and a couple of local schools. We've been able to create the content. We're talking about having a classroom in our facility to really talk about what we do. And here's how I would phrase it. And if I'm coloring too far outside the lines, I'll stop.
No.
We talk about the periodic table. Okay.
Of elements?
Of elements.
Okay.
Okay. And no one talks
Sending
about...
me back to high school, Pete, but I'm with you.
Okay. The periodic table is every element we know the Earth will give us at a given time. In 1900, there was 80 of them. Now in 2020, there's 120 of them. These are all the elements that we can use to work to make the world a better place in conjunction with the Earth. Lithium, I think, in the 70s was for medical. Now it's the driving force between the lithium-ion battery. But what we do is in that realm. And I think if you talk to young folks, they're not done discovering. Remember, this was 80 in 1900. There's 120 now. We don't know how many there's going to be. But if some folks are saying, you know, we'd like to figure out what we can do in conjunction with the Earth that's friendly with the Earth to try and use these chemicals and or gases or anything else. And so I just think that's fascinating, and I don't think there's any reason we shouldn't, when we are building this curriculum in conjunction with the state, we think the state could be a leader in this because it's a natural thought to say, what are the materials we're using and how as we get into next generation drones and electric batteries? And so,
it's pretty out there. I mean, that's a pretty, I mean, just the way you guys are engaging and thinking about it feels like bigger than MFT is. How do you think about investing the time to have your head of HR go into comprehensive high schools and go into schools? Like, how do you think about that from a time utilization standpoint?
I think the passion that Denise has for it, first of all, I'd never try and bridle that. She's out there to help. She's out there to provide opportunities to kids and a little bit of reassurance for parents. But she's doing it in conjunction with the state. That's the best part. She's not alone on an island. She gets asked to be in panels like that. So,
you get a lot of help from the state?
She works on a lot of these agencies are sort of state driven and things like that. So we're going to continue that. We think we're just starting, certainly in creating the classroom curriculum as well as this larger marketing manufacturing program. Hopefully there's going to be some more of it.
So you were talking about the periodic table and talking about sort of the elements. And I mean, you know, you didn't say the word, but I was sort of sensing some connection to sustainability there, right? Thinking about how do we use the elements and the minerals and gases, whatever we have on the planet to do certain things and maybe do it in a way that's less harmful or in cooperation. So we're not making things worse overall. How do you think about that? You know, metal finishing, you know, and just the chemicals that are involved there. I'm sure a lot of people have questions about this. How do you think about sort of green in your business?
Yeah, well, we started, and it's actually, I think we just had our 5th anniversary, but, you know, we think that historically non-green industry, like a lot of industries are, and nobody did anything wrong. Those were the rules.
Yeah, that's right.
But we've just worked really hard on a green story. And it wasn't like we showed up in this sort of noble way and said, we're going to have a green story. I was honestly looking at my income statement, looking where the big levers were. And I kept seeing energy, energy, energy. So we did the deal with the Green Bank to reinvest in the building. And then we took, you know, if something's cost you $25,000 or $30,000 a month and you can take out 10% per month, it starts to be impactful, right? Mm-hmm. You're looking for levers. But you realized when you started to look at your business and you'd say, every dollar I spend, some amount goes to gas, water, and electricity. and we're watching those numbers drop. We just know intuitively that's a pretty good green story.
Yeah, it is a good green story.
So we pay attention to it. I don't think we don't talk a lot about this stuff. You don't see a lot in the press about it. We just think it's the right thing to do as a company. And so we've been doing it since 2017, and we're not gonna
and you're
stop.
able to do it. Sounds like you're doing it, and it's good for the environment, but also good for the green in terms of your P&L.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You know what? If at the end of the day we spend more than we make, none of it matters.
Not going to get us.
know.
It's not going to get us very. Not going to get us very far. Do you think that having that green story is compelling to the next generation that's looking to maybe work with MFT?
I hope so. I hope it's very important too to a lot of our customers who get questioned about a lot of these things from Wall Street. You know, that we're really have a company that's really green conscious, right?
Do you use it as part of your marketing? Is it in some of your materials what you guys are doing there?
You know, it's definitely in there. I don't know that we lead with anything to our customers other than how we can help. But if you peel back the onion, we're happy to field the question and say, here, let us tell you what we're doing, you know. But again, our questions are always about how can we help.
So now that you've sort of built the scaffolding of the people, it sounds like you got the process in place, you're working on recruiting and retention, innovative, and sort of how you're partnering with workforce development. So what do you think about going to market and demand generation and getting out there and meeting customers? What are you guys doing? What have you done to kind of grow the business in that way?
Well, it's a 75-year-old company we've never really marketed, but we put together what I think is a pretty talented business development team. There's a lot of great tools out there to get your messages out there so you can efficiently not waste your time knocking on the wrong doors. There's the ability to push your message out there through websites.
Yep.
There's also the ability to pull based on you can monitor sort of web traffic. So we do those things, and we're really excited about that. We're just now doing it. Like sitting here today, you know, I don't know that I would have done this a year ago.
Really?
Yeah, but in 2020, I brought in some partners I mentioned earlier from out of state. Some really good folks. We've got a really good board of some people that have really had impactful careers, and we're in the ability to scale. Remember, I can go tell a good story, but if all of a sudden the work shows up, do I have the workforce? Do I have the equipment? Can I make the capital investment to go ahead and scale that? And we're in a position now where we're working really hard to make sure we're prepared to do both.
Is that why you looked for outside support from an investment standpoint?
Yeah, I think it was scalability. Remember, you know, the P&Ls that I came from previous in my career, the same thing. Everything's just missing 2 zeros. So, and it was the ability to say, let's build the best business that we can. I also think that there's a benefit to a critical mass, right? It's really important to note that what we're doing as a business is not going away. It's an integral part of it. And so we're trying to fill that need. So I brought them in to be able to scale it, fortify it, and really be able to respond to the market a little bit better.
So you've been, you know, it sounds like the business MFT was already in aerospace before you got there. You've sort of doubled down on that. How do you think about it all, if you think about it at all, sort of diversification outside of just servicing that market?
I saw a couple great businesses around and much, much bigger than ours. And when I looked at their balance, there's aerospace and defense, there's medical, and then you get into some general commercial stuff. So we like that, and we do have all those components to create that ballast. Within aerospace, you do commercial, you do military, and do general, which is the private jets. And we have our eye on some of the burgeoning things, you know, some of the next generation things we see coming up. So we pay attention to the ballast in our book of business. We try not to ever get too vulnerable to market fluctuations.
Do you find it challenging to sort of service markets that maybe have different demands from a quality perspective? Like does general industrial or automotive have sort of lesser quality standards than say aerospace does, and does that make serving both markets a challenge?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us is finding things that fit our eye and understanding that within a few minutes if we can help or not. And there's a lot of demand with the return to manufacturing, the buoyancy that we're getting here in the state and across the country, to find that out. I think there's a common denominator, and we probably play at one of the higher ones because we deal in this NADCAP AS9100 world. So there is a read across. It's not impossible. There's a lot of overlap. But yeah, you may have to add some infrastructure in terms of bodies and whatnot to handle it. But again, we can sort that out pretty good up front. And two, there's a ton of demand in the aerospace and defense side.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
What do you see in them? Talk about that a little bit. What's your view from your vantage point on the market and market opportunity just in sort of the aerospace and defense side of things?
Well, I just think right here in the state, I think the deals that the state has made with Pratt to keep them here, and next thing you know, they get the 135 and the geared turbofan. You see the deal that just went on with Sikorsky, and now you've got Electric Boat. So you have Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Raytheon here in the state and this whole infrastructure, and then the suppliers that feed that. So there's not, I always use an old phrase, we're not fighting over the last can of gas on Mad Max.
No, we're definitely not.
There's plenty of demand out there, and we just want to be able to help and participate.
So when you think about that, and we'll kind of start to wrap it up, but when you think about that market, the market demand and the market opportunity, you've talked about sort of partnering with schools and stuff like that. Are you partnering with any of the other organizations? You touched on ACM a little bit. Sort of curious what you see from an ecosystem standpoint and how you're looking to leverage the ecosystem to make MFT better and how MFTs may be contributing to make the ecosystem better.
I'm really glad you asked that question. We're doing a lot of work right now with Ron and the group over at CCAT. Oh. Right, we're into model-based manufacturing, and we've invested personally in some equipment, and we're over there working on those things. The goals for overhaul and repair have not changed. You want to compress the downtime of that aircraft, and you want to extend the part life. There are new digital tools that can really help that we're working on and we're getting ready to bring to market. And to put it in perspective, if I can compress, or we can compress, somebody can compress, say, 10 days less to turn an aircraft, and you got 50 aircraft, you just manufactured 500 days of lift. Talk about taking pressure off of the system. Mm-hmm. So we're into this technology, and not just there, but that's a great partnership that we have there. Really, really pleased.
Is that the name of the, I want to get back to the organizations, but just is that really the name of the game from this perspective? Is we got to keep those planes. We've got to get them out to the market as quickly and cheaply as possible, yep. But then keep them flying. Because every day they're down is just a lost opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, you got to plug something in now. Now you got a redundancy, and you start to manufacture airplane days intuitively. It has to be a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have that. So CCAT's one. We're doing a lot of work with the schools. We're excited about talking to the state about building some classroom to really try and create this corridor. And it's not for everybody in the schools, but the corridor of what we're building in the business that we're in. We think, I use a periodic table, and I'm not really trying to gloss it up, but it's a real thing, right? If you can come in and think along those lines, and if you have an inclination towards chemistry and things like that, whether applying this, doing the coding removal, or you get into our digital world, we're really trying to expose that.
Are you seeing growth and interest in that area, right? Because it's been talked about for decades that United States in general has sort of moved away from graduating as many engineers, chemical and mechanical, and otherwise got away from sort of the broad swath of trades. Probably a little bit to our dismay, and had a lot of sort of liberal arts and general stuff. Are you seeing interest coming back? Has you guys seen some success and interest in chemistry and engineering?
100%. And the digital stuff, right? Leverage these tools. Right? Yeah, very much so. So I think it's more of a marketing effort. And I think I go back to what Denise is doing now. They're actually getting to the parent level in high schools to say, we're not going to force you to do it, but know this is an option. There's a really good opportunity to have a really good career here. So we want to work in conjunction with everybody else to try and at least get the word out there. But yeah, when you start talking about these things in this fashion, I think it definitely resonates, because I think this is a group of folks who really care about the environment, really know how to leverage technology way better than we do. And if we can do that to become a better company, require less resources, get things to last longer, hard to believe there's not going to be some interest, because it's pretty exciting.
And just a last question before we go to rapid fire. You mentioned CCAT, and I think it's a huge asset that the state has, the ability to partner with them to leverage technology. But I think a lot of small businesses I talk to are like either afraid or don't know where to start. And I wonder if you could just sort of talk about your experience with CCAT. You talked about model-based definition and getting involved in there, and you're doing some projects. Was it difficult to get started? Are they providing the support you need? Is it a distraction from the business, additive? How are you thinking about it?
No, I think Ronnie's built a really good platform over there, and I think the folks have been tremendous to work with, and we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, right? And so I look at it and say, I have the tools, but maybe not the laboratory. But if you can help me build the process, then I can pull it out of the lab and scale it. Maybe that comes from getting used to working with a company like NetJets, but to me, that's very fundamental and not really difficult to do. At the same time, probably could help a lot of other companies as they get into it. So I think it's a good resource, and there's the definition, there's the inspection, and then there's the repair. There's a whole cycle piece there that's going to be impactful, and somebody's going to do it. And
might as well be
Connecticut's
us.
got a chance to be in part of it. And I'm sure the bigs in the state, meaning the OEMs, would love to be able to keep it local and not have to truck things or fly things all over the country, especially with where fuel prices are. Just a thought.
I absolutely 100% agree. Those partnerships are so important. So, all right, Pete, we're going to move to a rapid fire round of questions, man. You ready?
I'm out of juice here.
Yeah,
Right.
no, you're good. You're good. Red Sox or Yankees?
Mets.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
A good double espresso made at home.
There you go.
Though
iPhone.
Dunkin' if I had to choose
You had
between
to choose
those
one.
two.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Both.
Both. Man doesn't want to choose. Do you have a favorite business book?
Do I have a favorite business book? Good question. I read a ton of them. I'm reading Disney Wars right now that ended in about 2005, and it's fascinating to watch these folks go at it. I'd have to go with that one because it's on my nightstand right now.
There you go. If you had to do something, Peter, other than be the chairman and CEO of MFT, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, what would you do with your time?
Think about getting back into the private jet world.
Really?
Yeah. It's in my DNA.
There you go. Pete, what's something that you learned early in life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
I learned early in life to root for other people's successes. And it's been one of the greatest gifts, is to genuinely root for others and try and bring out the best in others, including my employees or anybody that I run into. It's brought so much joy to my career to watch other people succeed. So I would say unequivocally that would be it.
No, that's a really good lesson, but you bring that one home too. What's something, Peter, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back in time and tell young Peter, and if he listened to you, would have a real positive impact on his life?
I think everything can be broken down into very, very simple steps. If you clear the smoke out of the room and really understand the essence of what you're dealing with, then no problem really seems overwhelming. It's usually the noise and the commotion and the fog and the different bits and pieces that come around it that made things harder than they needed to be.
So just break it down, look at the component parts, and everything's solvable?
Well, yeah. I mean, you break it down into component parts. Exactly right. None of it's impossible,
Dude, I absolutely love it. Peter, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great having a chat with you. Love your passion. Love what you guys are up to, and looking forward to rooting for your success.
Thank you, Ari. I really appreciate the time today. It was great to talk to you.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.